Hello, everybody. This is Brian Tonsoni with Delphi Bracketology Bracket Babblings. The week here of February 7th, we're recording before school. We're a part of Student Union Sports podcast group. Check them out at studentunionsports.com. I'm with Senior Daniel Jakes today, and we're going to be talking the most recent bracket news for the NCAA men's. Daniel, welcome to the show. We're going to start off talking our number one seeds. They even, despite some upsets, they have remained the same. Maybe the order of our number one seeds have changed. Talk about what we see at the number one seed line.
Well, at the number one seed line, we have Villanova as our number one overall seed. I don't think that's going to change too much unless one of the Big 12 powerhouses goes on a run or Nova ends up sliding a couple games. But I think they'll be on that one seed line throughout the season. Next, we have Gonzaga. I don't really like Gonzaga. If they were to lose at any point during their season, I don't think they stay on that one seed line. I think they drop to a two seed. I don't have a lot of love for the West Coast teams. They don't really schedule anybody, although they did beat Arizona. I don't really like how they play, and they know how to play the game, though. They run the table, they're good just about every year, but they never really make that run postseason time. So, and then we have the two Big 12 teams in Kansas and Baylor. I really like those teams. They know how to schedule. Kansas beat Kentucky last week at Kentucky. That doesn't happen very often, although they've lost twice this year to Kansas and UCLA. So, but yeah.
The tough thing for me right now to try to decide what's going on is Kansas and Baylor, and one team's going to win that conference and one team's going to lose. Baylor recently lost at home to Kansas State. Kansas lost at home to Iowa State. Those are tough losses at home. And then you have a team sitting down there that's North Carolina and Florida State from the ACC, and both of those teams have 9 top 50 wins. That equals Baylor's. The difference is the North Carolina and Florida State have a little bit worse losses on their schedule, but if North Carolina or Florida State maybe should run the table, win the ACC tournament, I think that's the only way you're going to upset those 4 teams that we have on the number one seed. And you might even throw Virginia in there. I don't see Oregon repeating last year where they had, double-digit top 50 wins, and that's why they snuck in over Michigan State last year. So I think Oregon, the ceiling for them is a 2, and I think they're going to be fighting out Arizona, UCLA for 2, 3, and 4 seeds from that conference. So I think we're kind of we had Louisville up there, and then Louisville has been injured and on the road, and you got to kind of take some injuries in. But those are 4 ACC teams. But of those 4 ACC teams, I think North Carolina, Florida State has the resume to bounce up into that number one seed. As far as Gonzaga, the big question is what if they lose? You know, they still have an okay resume. Like you said, they beat Arizona, beat some teams. But if they were to lose one game, I think you might see them drop to number 2 in the West. So, Daniel, let's talk about our top 4 seeds, because on Saturday at 12:30, CBS and the NCAA Men's Selection Show is going to reveal their top 16, which is really going to give a lot of insight into their selection process, and we're going to see how we match up halfway through the bracket season. So, talk about some of the teams that we have in the top 4 lines.
The 3 seed line is something that I think that we've really struggled with. A lot of experts have Wisconsin really high up in the 3-4 range. We don't really like Wisconsin. We don't really think they have the resume to be a 3-4 seed. We have them around the 5-6, I believe, but I don't really see the love for them. They don't have the resume that a Louisville has, who is 6 strength of schedule, 10 non-conference, and they're 5-0 against, or 9-1 against 1 through 50. So I don't really see the love for Wisconsin. We have.
Let me jump in on Louisville. We had Louisville as the 5th best team in the tournament, and their loss just dropped them down to 9. So now they're a 3 seed for us, as you mentioned, but they're pretty good at that
absolutely.
3 seed line, because the teams ahead of them, Virginia, Oregon, Florida State, North Carolina on the 2 line, that's quality teams, and you have Arizona following. So our top 10 teams are pretty solid. 2 of them have to be 3 seeds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's the ACC's power pack this year. They're top heavy, and they may get some bubble teams in there like a Syracuse, who nobody really thought would sneak in because they had such a terrible start to the season, but they've come around beating people at the Carrier Dome, which, I mean, come tourney time, nobody will want to play them if they do sneak in somehow.
You mentioned Wisconsin. That was one of our topics for today. You know, Wisconsin has good numbers. They're ranked high in the AP poll and the coaches poll, but I think they have 3 top 50 wins, and their schedule strength is 187 non-conference strength of schedule, and they have no losses outside the top 50. That's 2, and they've only won 2 games, as compared to Louisville, who has 4, Arizona, who has 4, Florida has 4, and Kentucky has 4. When you get down to our 4 seed line, Duke and Purdue both have 5, and West Virginia has 6. So, the struggle is where do you find Wisconsin? And I think the answer, Daniel, might be in the other metrics. When you look at Sagarin and KenPom, Wisconsin's pretty high, and it'll be interesting on Saturday to see how much those other metrics are influencing the committee. If you see Wisconsin at a 3 or 4, then we know we got to start looking at those other metrics. But it's hard. The only team I see in our top 4 that could be replaced by Wisconsin is maybe UCLA, who is a very similar bad strength of schedule with only 2 top 50 wins. And the only reason they're there is because Butler, Xavier, and Creighton, who have a lot more top 50 wins, have had struggles recently, but we easily could throw those 3 teams in. So,
well, 2 seeds up is Creighton for us, and they have 6 wins against the top 50. And, I mean, it's just we struggle with having to use different metrics this year. Unlike last year, it was all WarrenNolan.com looking at top 50 wins, RPI. But I guess we really just have to start looking at different ratings and KenPom. And
if you're a Cincinnati or a Wisconsin fan, you could point to probably 2 teams in our top 4, and that's Purdue and UCLA. But you're an Ohio State fan. I'm an Indiana fan, and I don't like Purdue, and it's rivalry week, and we have Purdue at 14. They played a tough Villanova. Their non-conference schedule wasn't great, but they've beaten both of the top teams. They've beaten Wisconsin at home, but then on the road to Maryland. So they've beaten the top teams in the Big Ten that they've been asked to play. And so, I think Purdue is deserving of that top seed. And the other team is UCLA, which you mentioned the West Coast teams. UCLA only 2 top wins. The one was Kentucky. But now Kentucky's struggling, yeah. Right? What do you think of Kentucky? We have Kentucky as a 3. I'm thinking they might even be a 4, and some people have them as a 5. What are your thoughts on Kentucky?
Well, if Duke gets rolling, Duke could easily jump Kentucky. They just got Coach K back. They could go on a run here. But Kentucky, they're just an up-and-down team. They're a young team like normal. We just really have to watch the play, or they just really rely on the play of Malik Monk and their freshman point guard Darren Fox. But they got smoked last weekend by 22, and it was a road game, but Florida just put it to them, and I think that could be one of the reasons why they start dropping is because they don't win road games. And who knows, maybe Florida ends up winning the SEC, and they can even go up higher in our rankings.
Kentucky's a very talented team, and we have them at the 12th seed line right now, which is a number 3 seed. Probably could drop them a little bit, but here's for our listeners. Kentucky has the 5th toughest schedule in the land, is 3-3 on the road, true road games, 4-5 in the top 50 with no losses outside the top 50. And then you compare them to Wisconsin, who is 4-2 on the road, but a 65th schedule strength and only 2 top 50 wins. And I think that win goes, when you compare those teams head to head, I think Kentucky takes it. Now, if they're real tight, we need to look at who those wins are, and we'll be doing more of that as the the bracket gets closer, that we'll be comparing Kentucky's wins to Wisconsin's wins. But I think when you do that, you'll find that, Wisconsin, Minnesota is their top win, or Michigan. They haven't played Michigan State yet, but, Kentucky to us is a top 4 team and shouldn't be outside of that 4 come Saturday. I think the 2 teams on our list are going to be Purdue and UCLA that we miss. If we miss 2 here on Saturday, but we think they're worthy. Let's talk a little bit about the impact of upsets. We saw 6 top 10 teams on Saturday lose. What's the value of that to the top teams, and what's the value to those teams that are pulling the upsets?
Well, to the teams that are pulling the upsets, that's working nothing in their working nothing but in their favor. If they beat a Kansas or Baylor at home, maybe they start rolling and they start winning. To those teams that lose, they hope they start winning, because then that loss just looks that much better. No loss looks good, but if you were to lose, you hope that team starts winning and starts upsetting even better teams.
When you look at a team, Daniel, and you see that they have beaten Kansas at Kansas, what kind of impression does that make on you as an evaluator for the bracket?
Well, that's a great win, but it depends on what they did after that win that really impresses me.
So, in other words, Kansas State beating Baylor, a top seed, and Iowa State beating Kansas, they've got your attention now. That win's not going to go away. Mm-hmm. But we want to still, they can't go out and lose 4 in a row.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're so stuck on that bubble.
Yeah, they can't pull a Minnesota and start losing 5 in a row, and then we have to go back and look at their entire body of work.
And there we go again with the weekly reference to body of work versus recency bias. And I think it's really hard as a sports fan to fight that recency bias. When you see Minnesota losing 5 in a row, you think you need to drop them to an 8, 9, 10. But when you look at their resume and you compare resumes to other teams, they're still sitting in possibly 7, 8 range overall. If it wasn't for those losses, could even maybe comparably be in our 6 range. So, it's always interesting. You got Indiana, again, my team that had really 2 great wins, but that's not the same team. And how does the committee figure out what is the team currently versus what happened in November? There's no criteria that says we have to score the team's, the most recent wins or losses are more important than the previous ones. It's supposed to take the body of work. And so November wins, really, they matter. But, boy, when teams change for the better or for the worse, it's kind of hard not to watch them. We're going to pause the recording here because our school bell is about to ring. And on the backside, we'll come back and talk about the vaunted bubble. Okay, the school bell has rung and the kids are officially allowed into school, but we're not done talking basketball yet. And we're going to go to the bubble, which if you have teams on the bubble, it's always the question that people ask, is my team going to get in? We're going to talk specifically about our last team in right now, and that is Clemson. And Clemson has 13 wins. They have 3 top 50 wins. They have 8 total top 100 wins. And they have only 1 loss outside, a schedule strength of 18, a non-conference schedule strength of 81. Daniel, talk about how, Clemson's sitting at only 3-7 in the conference, and they really don't feel like a team that belongs in the tournament because they've struggled in the conference. But tell people why we have them in. What part of that resume is somewhat impressive?
Well, the part of the resume that I think is the most impressive is their strength of schedule. Compared to some of these bubble teams that we are looking at, like a Georgia Tech, say their non-conference strength of schedule is 268. Their non-conference is 81, like you said. And I think that is really one of the night and days of comparing teams, is looking at their strength of schedule, who they beat. Georgia Tech has 5 wins against the top 50, but I think Clemson's body looks better. Who they lost to looks better rather than who they beat. Yeah,
and the bubble for us is whenever we meet and discuss as a group here at Delphi Bracketology, we throw a couple teams in the 42, 43, 44, 45 range, the last 4 in, and then we go home that night and they play and they get beat. And the bottom line is you got to win games. And I think I totaled up. We feel that there's about 21 or 22 at-large berths that are relatively safe. If I think 16 that are absolutely safe, and then a team. I don't want to jinx it. So there's a team that really wants to get in really bad. That is sitting at 19-4 or 18-4 that looks really solid, but they're in the seventh seed range. So about 5 of those 21 need to win. Need to just make sure they don't fold. But that leaves 14 spots, and we have 34 teams on our spreadsheet that we're looking at. And that sounds like a lot, 14 or 15 spots and 34 teams for contention. But some of those 34, when we look at it, maybe there's only 21 teams that really have a legitimate shot. I think the key for some of these teams on our bubble is you're going to have a good stretch of 5-1 down the stretch and make a run in the tournament to get on that bubble. But Clemson, compared to Georgia Tech, 2 teams in the conference, and Georgia Tech has 5 top 50 wins. But you said it, the strength of schedule is 268. You look at Texas Tech, who we have in our first 4 out. I think they probably should be a little bit lower, but they have 3 top 50 wins. But their strength of schedule is 134, and I think ultimately Texas Tech is going to be on the outside unless they really run the table and beat some biggies in the Big 12. You're looking at teams, surprise teams for us, and right now at 13-11 and 12-10, these 2 respective teams don't look overall schedule is Georgetown and Tennessee. What do you think of those 2 having a chance maybe to sneak in based on their strength of schedule that we're looking at?
Well, Georgetown, I can definitely see it. They have the 15th strength of schedule with the 22nd non-conference. I think it's definitely something that we could consider. But I mean, they just have to win. I mean, they're in the Big East, and they'll have plenty of opportunities to beat some of the top teams: Nova, Xavier, Butler, Creighton. They can definitely go on a run there and maybe start getting more talk about the bubble.
Yeah, and the 3 teams we have outside of our bubble, Georgia Tech, Texas Tech, 4, Georgetown and Tennessee, all have multiple top 50 wins outside the bubble. That's going to get the attention of the committee to watch. If you're a fan of that program, you got to just pump the wins, and you got to avoid really bad losses right now inside your conference. And these are the teams that don't want to go come that first week of March and lose their first tourney game because they just need all the wins you can get. And so when you look at our seed list, probably everyone in the 8, 9, 10, 11 range is on the bubble, no guarantee. So if you look at delphibracketology.weebly.com and look at our weekly updates, you can see the seed list as of last night before Monday night's games. We did adjust Louisville a little bit, but when you look at those seeds, 8, 30, the number is next to them, number 30 on down to 45. Those 15 are up for grabs, and we only listed the first 4 out, but there's, we go down from 68, the 69th team and 70th team are the first teams out. We go all the way down to 89. So there's about 20 teams in there that we're watching closely. So these games matter. This is rivalry week, so you got some matchups, North Carolina, Duke. You got Indiana, Purdue. You have some other big games, as they always are in the conference. Daniel, what are you looking forward to this week? What do you think we need to watch as far as our bracket?
Well, one thing we need to watch are more upsets. I mean, it seems like there's about 4 upsets a week now. But I think that we just really need to watch the bubble teams. It's not the best bubble that we've ever seen, but there's so many teams that are so even that we just got to be able to distinct their best wins compared to other teams' wins. And rivalry week is always a good week to get that done. Always
big games on television every night. Watch it. Follow us at Delphi Brackets. Send us a tweet if you want to know what we think of your favorite team. We'll be glad to take a look at it and share with you. But for Daniel Jakes, this is Brian Tonsoni finishing up our podcast this week on Bracket Babblings, a part of StudentUnionSports.com podcast group. Watch a lot of basketball. Root for your favorite team to win. That's the best way they can get into the tournament. Thanks, and have a good week.